food disaster at a wedding at the weekend. You'll love this. Why is it, by the way, the when you go to a venue, surely they've done enough weddings now that they should appreciate the fact that the photographer is probably going to photograph the speeches, right? Mm-hmm. So why organise the crew meal for the speeches?
Yeah. It happens so many times.
Oh, drives me nuts. I'm more than happy to take Marmite sandwiches and sit in my car. Anyway, so I was famished. I think I sent you a text, actually.
You did.
Absolutely famished. Yeah. It was about 9 p.m, 9:30. I hadn't eaten all day.
Was that what did I send you back a picture of my pizza?
Anyway, they put out a really nice spread outside. I mean, they've just eaten this beautiful meal, a lovely hotel. And so the spread goes out, and I think, oh, nick something off the edge of that. I'm always feeling intensely uncomfortable about
I'm
eating any food in front of guests.
Yeah, I never
It's
do.
just like a no-no for me.
Even if I get offered a canapé or
I take a canapé if I'm offered one, but I wouldn't go to take one because that's not my place.
No, absolutely. And it's the sweetie table.
Oh, sweet Troy, I just have to stay well clear of. But anyway, I thought they look nice.
I just want to plunge my hand deep into them.
So I saw there was a roll there. It was and it looked really nice. I mean, rolls are rolls, aren't they? But these rolls look like super rolls. And I thought, it looks like chicken in there. I quite fancy myself a bit of that. Anyway, I picked this roll up, and it was egg. And I took a ginormous bite into this thing, thinking it was chicken, and it went down my front, it was down my shirt, it was down my jacket, it was down my trousers, and I stood there. And it was almost like everybody, to a person, just turned at that moment and looked at the photographer covered in an egg sandwich.
Robbing an egg sandwich.
I sloped off. Nothing to see here.
The FujiCast.
Anyway, hello, welcome to episode number 16. We're building these up, now.
16.
Woohoo! This week, thank you to our friends at Simpler Straps for letting us give away a military-grade rugged camera strap, each to our favourite email question of the week. Go to simpler.us. YouTube dropped a suggestion to watch a film by a photographer in San Francisco called Reggie Ballesteros. Why do all photographers have better, sort of more exotic names than us, Kev?
It's not just photographers. Everybody has a better, more exotic name than me. Maybe not you, but me.
No, but mine's Neil James. Yours...
You have a silent letter in your name.
Do I?
You have a silent E on the end of Neil.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, that's true. Anyway, Reggie, his film about colour science journey from Nikon to Fujifilm ticked a few boxes for us, so we asked him to share his thoughts on that journey on today's show. Your questions about anything Fujifilm or photography related, technical, geek work of the year, artistic or even personal, as they have been getting recently, click at FujiCast.co.uk and there's our self-indulgent minute where we thank you for your wonderful reviews you've been making at Apple Podcasts. I do want to mention something else that's really, really, really important. Coming up in November, there is a certain conference.
Correct. The X-Weddings Conference.
Yes.
Number 2.
Number 2?
Yeah.
Did you ever think you'd get to that number?
No, I didn't ever think I'd get to number 1, frankly, and I didn't think my marriage would survive it, but we did, just about. We're just finishing counselling now, so I decided to crack on with number 2 and try and put a nail in the coffin of the marriage.
Will Gemma be there at this one? No!
I don't think so.
Yeah, she will. She you without Gemma's like strawberries without cream.
Yeah.
Gin without tonic.
Yes, more likely. Yeah, more likely. Yeah, so 13th and 14th of November in Bath at the Hilton, just as it was last year.
Yes.
The X-Weddings Conference, and we've pretty much got the speakers lined up. I'm just waiting on one other, and we'll be good to go. So I'm not going to announce the speakers just yet.
Yeah.
But
although by the time this cast comes out, because we do record them slightly in advance, you may well have said maybe by a day or so.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true.
So if you have announced them, doesn't it look a great lineup of speakers? Amazing. I could not wish for anything better.
Yeah.
But if we haven't, it's looking good.
Yeah, it's looking good. Well, it's going to be good anyway.
You.
No,
You.
You're part of it. You helped me a lot, especially with the audio side of stuff. So yeah, we will be doing it 13th and 14th of November at the Hilton in
Bath. Yeah, it's a beautiful. I think it was Steve Vaughan I saw on a post that you'd done something about it. Said for anybody that's coming from overseas, Bath is one of the most beautiful cities in the country. And it's a fantastic place to hold a conference.
It's the reason why I kind of went there. I mean, it's relatively close to where I live, but it's great. And, you can fly to Bristol. It's 25 minutes on the train from Bristol. It's
so easy.
Yeah, it's very good.
Are we going to do a podcast there as well? We should do, shouldn't we?
Yeah, I'm sure we will. Yeah.
Should do a round table one, maybe the end of a day in a breakout room, or maybe as the end feature of the actual day one of the conference.
Yeah, because we had the Q&A thing last year, didn't we? And that worked really well.
So the Q&A could kind of work as a podcast.
Hand in the microphone. If you strap your audio recording stuff to the microphone.
Well, I was thinking actually,
you did that anyway.
In Question Time Styly, the BBC Question Time, where somebody has a big boom and they go into the audience and ask questions. Could set something up like that, couldn't we?
You've got the biggest boom I've ever seen.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very proud of my boom.
It's really hairy as well.
It's sitting down there by your side, funny enough. If you just look down there, it's like an animal. This thing. Right, questions. Do you want to launch? Have you got one? Do you want to launch first?
Okay, so I have one, and Roberto Munoz.
I always give you these ones because I like anything from Peru, Brazil, Spain, Argentina goes instantly your side of the desk. Heribertomunoz. Right. So almost definitely pronounced it wrong. I think it is Peru. Where's Guarabo?
Anyway,
Alan Gump, do you know?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Kevin Mullins' YouTube channel and Instagram. Doesn't mention you at all, Neil. I like the film simulations that you recommended last year. Street Day, Night, Portrait, Merwitz, Par, Padilla. That was a YouTube film I did about custom settings.
Yeah.
Are you using the color chrome effect now on the XT3 or any other updates to those film simulations? Okay, which is a really good question. Puerto Rico. There we go. Puerto Rico. And in fact, this is going to be my strap. My question of the week is going to go to Puerto Rico. You're going very early. Yeah, I am indeed. Mostly because he says at the bottom, if you're still giving straps away, please send it to me. So I am.
Does Puerto Rico give me a chance to play my... No? No. Okay.
I'm not sure. I think that's more Mexican. Anyway, color chrome effect, etc. So in the XT3 and originally in the GFX, we had things like the color chrome effect and the grain, strength of grain, and also now in the XT3 we have the monochrome warming up and cooling down. And the color chrome effect, I have to say, I use it. I've applied it. He's referring to my presets, the custom settings that I use, and the one that I've applied it to is the Par setting. So the Martin Par setting that I try and emulate his very high contrast, colourful, filmic.
And there's a particular blue about Martin Par.
Yeah, so it's based on kind of Velvia. Film sim, and so the chrome effect, the color chrome effect, adds a little bit of vibrance, although I have to say I find it quite difficult to see it myself. I mean, you can, but it's not doesn't jump off the page, if you like. And the thing about that setting, the color chrome effect setting, is that it slows the processing down a little bit, and everything's kind of just a little bit slower. So that's the only one really. Other than that, I don't
the color chrome slows
when it's saving that file, when it's saving that JPEG, it's doing more processing on top of it. So
would you always suggest, if you're shooting RAW, it makes no difference, of course. But
if you shoot RAW, it makes no difference.
But if you're shooting JPEG, to shoot standard? Is that what you're...
Well, if you're shooting JPEG, you need to be very careful about things like the color chrome effect and the grain, weak, high, off, all that kind of stuff, because they do add processing time.
A lot?
I would say it's noticeable. Okay. Yeah, especially if you're shooting in burst. Right. So yeah, and definitely on the GFX, because those files are so big anyway, it's right into the card. But yeah, so to answer your question, Roberto, Martin Par one, I've added it to it, works okay, but it's not something I would necessarily recommend just general shooting.
I've got two here. This is, bear with me, because this is quite a long in terms of a question and a follow-up bit to the question, which you'll understand in a moment. But I thought it was really interesting. There were two mails that came in. First one from Chris. Thanks for reading my... Chris Hunt, this is. Thanks for reading my email and for awarding me a camera strap. Oh, that was the one that Yeah, okay. Chris, I'm glad you got a sense of humour. You're still talking to us after that one. I'm sorry. I enjoyed the podcast, especially the piece at the end about street photography and what's happening with people becoming outraged at street photographers. I've been asked recently, are you CID? When I took a snap of a street worker, I've been told I had to leave an area, a public place, because I was disturbing. This chap said I was disturbing the birds feeding at the water's edge. The man who did this shouted down to me from a window, well, that's not disturbing the birds at all, is it? And took my photo and said he would be reporting me. For what and for whom, I'm not quite sure. I've also been asked to leave a shopping precinct because I was taking a photograph of a charity-supported sculpture of an owl, which is part of a series of owl sculptures. It's an interesting thing, though, with shopping precincts, because they do actually have, because usually they're private property, aren't they? And you have to gain permission to photograph on private property. So the shopping precinct thing, no matter it being a charity thing, I do hear you there.
Yeah.
That is probably maybe private property. Is there a reason that
it depends
that could be?
A little bit. I mean, I'm assuming by referring to it as precinct, he's probably in America. We don't know where Chris Hunt is.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's true.
So
maybe America have the same rules with
they do
private property.
They do have the same rules.
I'm sure.
But if you're in, let's just say we are in the Oracle Centre in Reading, and there's a really nice statue, and you stand there and take a picture with your Canon DSLR or your Fujifilm camera or whatever, and that's fine. And then the person next to you who stood there with their iPhone takes a picture of it.
Yeah,
that's fine also.
Who's going to get clobbered?
Exactly, yeah. And
in fact, that's what Chris goes on to say. He says exactly that. My point is that if I'd been using a smartphone like millions of other people do, would anyone at all have taken a blind bit of notice?
Probably not. And I'm very surprised actually if you were just taking a picture of some art installation that they took umbrage to it, but who knows? There may have been other stuff in it. But the story with the birds, that's very funny. The fella. So
you're disturbing the birds.
Yeah,
he might as well have used a bird scarer.
And then the best thing is he took a picture of him. You cannot take pictures.
Oh, the
I'm
irony!
Take a picture of you taking a picture.
Yeah,
the irony is the word. Correct.
Yeah. Well, that does leap on to the next one, and this I'm going really early with the strap as well, so I don't forget it.
Yeah,
Simon Pickard from, is it Quidditch in Devon? Quidditch? I mean, I know Quidditch, which is a game in Harry Potter, but Quidditch, I'd never heard of that before.
Sounds like a nice place, though.
It does. Well, anywhere in Devon sounds nice.
Well, that's true.
Yeah. Episode 12, referring back to Don McCullin exhibition. Thank you for another podcast, chaps. Already listened to this one twice. I think I'm left in a sombre and reflective mood, truth be known, as the audio covering the Don McCullin segment was powerful enough to make me stop and think of where the human race has got to in 2019, where it's going to in the future, and how it must have been 500 years ago. I agree with Kevin that the world is a far better place now than it was 500 years ago, but unfortunately there are still those who commit atrocities against their fellow men and women. They've been there throughout history and most likely continue with us for eternity. At the end of March this year, spent a happy hour in Oakhampton taking photographs of architecturally interesting buildings and other things of interest with the XE3. I played the hapless tourist while I shot away, and by was left alone for a couple of huffs and tuts maybe. On relaying my experience to my daughter, she assured me she whipped up the iPhone, walked up and down every street, in and out of every shop in Oakhampton, sneakily photographing and videoing constantly. Nobody would take the slightest notice of her, which is true. But what's interesting is this, and it's not so much a question as such, but I thought this was a really interesting thing, and thank you, Simon, for bringing this to our attention. When I was a member of the RPS, Royal Photographic Society, the membership was issued in August 2010 with a credit card size printed card called Know the Facts.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Please stop and search rights under Terrorism Act. After a series of complaints to the RPS from members that had been held by the police for taking photographs, mainly, it seems, in London. There are 9 bullet points. Here we go. Every person has a right to photograph in a public place. It is not against the law to photograph a police officer understanding normal duties. The police do have a duty to investigate incidents which may give rise to suspicion. If stopped by a police officer, remain calm and polite. You are not required to give any personal details unless driving a car or you are arrested. Officers may stop and search you and view images if they believe they could be used in connection with terrorism Officers have no powers to delete images. PCSOs may not search without a police officer present. You must be provided with a copy of the stop and search slip, which will include the officer's identity. I think
fairly sure all those rules still exist.
Great idea by the Royal Photographic Society, one of those societies that I believe are top of the tree when it comes to supporting the industry.
Yeah.
That is a really, really good idea. And you think they still exist?
I'm pretty sure those rules still apply.
I don't think that card goes out anymore, does it?
I don't know. I have seen it also, and I know that you can get similar things on the internet, and I think the NUJ supply their journalists with stuff, and things like that too. It's sad, isn't it, that we have to do that? But this goes back. We mentioned this way, 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 way back. There is an undercurrent of, especially street photographers, who are purposefully going out there to cause trouble, to antagonize the establishment, just to be able to say, hang on, I've got the right to do this. There's
a guy on YouTube that specializes in that, and he's such a belligerent guy. He stands there and he'll even, his commentary. His commentary, he sets another camera up, I'm sure, to record himself. His commentary is like, here we go, all right. And you think, you don't help anybody by doing this. You don't help anybody.
No.
All you're doing is making it far harder for the next photographer, and the next, and the next, and the next.
Yeah.
And there's part of me that just wants to say in an extremely immature fashion, grow up.
That's very clever, the way you did that without any sound effects.
I know, I've been practicing that.
Yeah, quite right. Okay.
Really good point. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, well done, Simon. Okay, so this is Matt Cook. Yep. And Matt Cook says, loving the podcast, fellows. Keep it up. This subject has been plaguing my mind of late. I'm sure you have touched on a similar subject matter before, but here I am asking for a guide in light of wisdom. How do you overcome being your own worst enemy? I know I'm the one holding me back from ending up where I want to be photography-wise, but I am my own worst critic. But there is just an overwhelming feeling of not being good enough, or is this just all part of the game?
That's camera strap worthy as well, that one,
Yeah, I'm sure this is a feeling that just about every photographer goes through, so I'm positive it will make for a lengthy discussion.
Yeah.
It will make for a lengthy discussion. However, I would like to kind of summarize it by basically saying, I think all photographers should always think that they're not good enough, because the moment you think I'm a good photographer is the moment that probably becomes a little bit problematic. Personally, that's my opinion. We should all be our own worst critic. That's we don't all have the benefit of a personal curator, so we are our own curators, and that's the way it is. And we have mentioned it before, as you mentioned, that when I look at my own work, I'm often the tut in and in and are in, and and not that it's necessarily bad, but it's you always want it to be better, and I think that's a good thing, to always want it to be better.
Do you feel that you've got to that stage?
What, that it's better?
Yeah.
It's better than it was last week, and hopefully next week it will be better than it is this week.
Yeah. I like that answer.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a camera strap.
But yeah, your own worst enemy, we all are, and you just have to ultimately try and push past that and see past that, and concentrate on the emotion that's in the pictures and the delivery of those emotions to the client, the people that are going to be seeing it. If it's your own personal work, then you've got the latitude to work harder with it and to make different images that you feel more appealing. It's not always going to be just because they're bad pictures. It could be just because the moment wasn't quite right, or you chose to photograph at the wrong time of the day and the light isn't great, and you're upset with the fact you didn't get the shutter speed right or something. That's just technical learning. But the looking at an image and sitting back and going, yeah, that was great, that's a great image. Of course that happens, but it's not going to happen every single time. It just won't.
I've been sitting on this email for weeks and weeks. Sometimes you'll read something over and then you think, I'll do that one this week, and maybe I'll do it the week after, and then anyway, Chris McSherry, thank you for this. I recently had a shoot in a maternity ward. I didn't want to bother all the parents in the ward with camera clicks, so I shot everything with the electronic shutter on the X Pro 2 and X-T3. All of the pictures turned out fine, as I had huge windows for natural light to work with. One picture was shot with the X Pro 2, which has a hint of rolling shutter, ? But not enough to ruin the picture. I was in aperture mode with auto ISO. I guess the ES in the X-T3 is generally better now, as I've found too many issues of rolling shutter shutter, but maybe that has more to do with my lack of understanding how best to use it. Is there a general rule of thumb for using the electronic shutter? Is it best kept for natural light? How do I avoid any risk of rolling shutter? And how often do you guys use it, if at all? Oh, I'd like this. On an added note, I completely typed this email with Neil's voice in my head. Sorry about that. What do you think, Kev, on that one? You've talked about electronic shutter and the way you use it before.
Yeah. So there's two downsides of the electronic shutter, which is this idea of rolling shutter and banding. Okay. So
it's the banding I was thinking about. That's not really the rolling shutter.
That's what he's referring to. Yeah. So the banding is when you can see shadows coming down the frame in when you're shooting, and ultimately it comes down to the frequency of the lighting. Okay. So you can mitigate it to a certain extent by using a shutter speed that's a multiple of the frequency of the lighting of the country you're in. Right. So I think in this country we work at 50 megawatts or whatever it is.
50 megahertz. 50 hertz, not megahertz. 50 hertz.
50 hertz.
Yeah.
So if you're shooting at a 50th, 100th, or 150th, then that might mitigate it. However, it may still be there. And Chris is right. It is better. It's greatly reduced in the X-T3 for sure, and will only get better in the future. This is something that all cameras struggle. Everybody that has an electronic shutter struggles from this. It's not a Fujifilm thing. Until this hallowed global shutter that everybody seems to talk about, that nobody seems to know what it is. And that's meant to fix that. But what I typically do is, and I think again we briefly mentioned this before, I'll go somewhere and I'll just run a burst of images on the electronic shutter and look at the LCD on the back, and you can see it. You can just see that.
If you see that, then you just
don't use it.
Don't use it. Yeah. I mean, the click isn't so loud on these cameras that I think it would offend anybody anyway.
No, absolutely. I don't think so.
I think the more time you use a Fujifilm camera, and you use mechanical shutter, I think in your mind you forget a little bit what it used to be like. I mean,
oh God, yeah.
What was the noisiest camera you've ever had?
Canon 1D Mark IV.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say.
It was like, and I've said this loads of times, it's like scaffolding falling down. If you put that on continuous, it's like brilliant pictures though.
Try telling a vicar in a church, say it's got an almost silent shutter. Yeah. Would you like to? There we go. Did you hear that? You have cough at the same time.
Yeah. No, it was great though. It was a good camera, but that was one of its downsides.
Yeah. But I think that's what happens now. We've got used to almost silent work, and silent work sometimes, that when we do click that shutter, you think, oh, that's a bit loud, isn't it? In actual fact, it's so quiet.
Yeah.
Even at its loudest.
And actually, it really makes me laugh, because if you watch TV, and even some people, when you're watching them when they're using their iPhones or their mobile phones, whatever, it's really funny if you're watching a TV show and they purposely switch on the shutter sound on the iPhone, just so they can pass over the fact that they're taking a picture. Yeah. And that's ridiculously loud if they've got their speaker up high. Yeah. And and it's the same, like, when the kids or Gemma or whatever are using their camera. Yeah. And that's totally electronic sound. There's no need for it to even be there. There's no shutter going off.
None at all.
And that's louder than like the mechanical shutter in the X Pro 2 and stuff. But Chris was actually in a birthing environment, so he was trying to be as silent as possible. But at the end of the day, you have to weigh up effectively, if the noise of this camera is going to interfere with something medical, right, then don't take the picture. Yeah. That's it. Well, not necessarily don't take the picture, but take the picture with the electronic shutter. And if it's got a band through it, then it's better to have a picture with a band through it than an upset mother giving birth.
Than no image at all.
Or no image at all. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. In fact, I took that principle on when I shot the when I shot the funeral, of the little boy in Suffolk. Good few months back now. I appreciated that actually I was getting a touch of banding. I was using an X100F. I was getting a touch of banding on absolutely silent shutter, but I was happy to exist with that and then have any noise at all.
Now the electronic shutter on the mechanical shutter on the X100F is still pretty damn
it's quiet. Yeah.
The electronic shutter obviously is 100% silent.
I think I was just super aware of anything.
Absolutely.
On that particular day. But thank you very much for your question. Shall we go for the self-indulgent minute, and then we'll go for some more? Then we've got Reggie Ballesteros, and then we got some more of your questions. So, Kev, you can go first.
Okay, so this is Ian Bursell, who is a great photographer in his own right. Great podcast, Neil and Kevin, and thanks for the mention and answering my question in episode 6. Loving the production, humour, chat, and advice you guys are giving. Keep up the good work. Nice to have this playing during the day while I'm working. It's like having a couple of mates in the office with me.
Minus the beers. This one is from Sulzy. I've just listened to all the episodes over the last week. He's binged. I'm sad I have none left. Great info, great personalities, damn good fun. Keep it up, and thank you for continuing to give your time and help to support the industry and those like me with the aim to be a full-time photographer. James Source, thank you very much.
This is from The Edge Picks, which I believe is Scott Johnson. Great podcast. I love to listen as I edit my weddings.
He's good.
Keep it up. He is good. The production is awesome, and the interviews of the photographers who aren't mainstream are excellent and opening my, and I'm sure other listeners, world of incredibly talented photographers.
Angel for Lie. I've just started to get into photography, and just 5 stars, and that was it.
Well done. 5 stars is good.
5 stars is good.
Yes. Feel free to leave less if you so wish.
No,
we will never be your friends and talk to you or send you Christmas presents.
Straight off the Christmas card list. But honestly, your integrity is important. We appreciate that, but we more than anything appreciate the reviews, and thank you for continuing to do them within Apple Podcasts. It does, and it does make a huge difference. It really does.
It's massive.
It does. When you changed to Fujifilm, the first thing you must have, did you struggle? Is struggle too strong a term? And the first thing you must have thought about was how are you going to make everything match up with the portfolio that, and now I know your portfolio now when you look online, that's all going to be Fujifilm pictures. But of course there would have been quite a difference, a stark difference in those days as well, between that you took on Canon and that you took on the Fujifilm.
There is some legacy stuff on my website if you dig deep enough back in the day, some Canon stuff. But yeah, I agree. I mean, it's the very different sensors, different, full frame to APS-C. Everything is different. The color depth.
What were the differences that you noticed straight away?
I have to say, I thought that back in those days, I was seeing more grain at lower ISOs than I was with my Canon system back in those days. But that was a symptom of APS-C.
And muddier skins.
Yeah, well, the skin tone
waxy
stuff.
skin.
Yeah, that was in the JPEGs, but yes, absolutely. There was substantial differences.
But also there were, I remember manipulating Fujifilm RAW files from that time, and skin was still difficult to work with.
Yeah, when you got to high ISOs, it was. Yeah. And you know that the reason why that happened was, also I'm told, is because in Asia, ladies would prefer to have waxy skin than grainy skin. So it's almost like a marketing thing. Okay. So people wouldn't buy the cameras if they were seeing cameras producing.
Is that true, or is that just a hearsay thing?
I believe it's true.
All right, okay. Yeah. All right.
But then actually, they realised that it's not those people that are buying the cameras. It's professional photographers.
And they want reality.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I watched a YouTube film a good couple of weeks ago now by a photographer called Reggie Ballesteros, and he was talking about his switch from Nikon, of course, because he's American, to the Fujifilm system. And as I watched it, I thought, Reggie's going to make he would make a super guest for the podcast for a few minutes or so, 10 minutes or so, just to talk about his change from one system to the other. And we've talked a lot about Canon, we've talked about Sony, but we've never really talked to anybody that's made the switch from Nikon to Fujifilm. So for that reason, I thought be great fun this week to talk to this chap, Reggie Ballesteros. So Reggie, congrats on the YouTube channel, which is growing fast, isn't it? The Fujifilm community seems to have really embraced you. You must be really happy about that.
Yeah, I mean, so when the X-T3 came out, I was really inspired by the fact that it had such powerful video capability. And, having been interested in YouTube and kind of like the strategy behind it, I kind of jumped on knowing that the X-T3 was going to be a very niche audience. And I started trying to push out content just to help others who either just got an X-T3 or maybe considering switching from a different system to the X-T3, especially working through all the problems that I had coming from a Nikon system to Fuji. And yeah, I'm pretty excited that it caught on a lot more than I thought, just because wedding photography is really my primary focus. It's growing a lot faster than I had expected, but I'm definitely excited to kind of help others out in their journey to Fuji.
So, look, we've chatted with photographers who've come over from Canon, and we even had a Canon ambassador on the show. But not specifically yet from. I'm going to try not to say Nikon, because that's how we say it in the UK. It's Nikon. I've got to say Nikon, but not specifically yet from Nikon. What was the first Fujifilm camera you picked up, and why was that?
The first Fujifilm camera that I purchased was the X100S back in 2014, and it was actually a wedding gift for my wife. So she and I both had photography interest, but she always had more interest in the classical, film style, range finder style cameras, and I thought that as a travel camera it would be a perfect camera for her to kind of use, and she absolutely loved it. She hated the EVF. She wanted to use the optical viewfinder all the time, and I would borrow the camera a little bit and use the EVF. She's like, why is this on? Just because she really likes the classical framing of a viewfinder and just kind of like catching the moment, and so that's where my Fujifilm kind of experience started was with the X100S.
One of the things I noted on the film that you made about your switch across from Nikon is that the Fujifilm gear you've now selected now actually weighs more than that you were carrying around before. Now, you do kind of answer the question in the film, but for those that haven't seen the film, so why that switch? Because for most people, it's the weight, isn't it? Initially, it's the weight.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one thing that I wanted just to keep it honest, because I'm part of a lot of Fujifilm Facebook groups, and everyone has these specific reasons why they switch over to Fujifilm. And directly for wedding photography, when I'm out in the field on a wedding day, I do not really strive for a lightweight kit. I want to go for ergonomics or quickness, so I opt for having the battery grip just so that it can balance better with the large aperture glass. And as far as the lens selection goes, I really like to go for the brands basically kind of like flagship, or they're very famous lenses for their character. Yeah. So typically on Nikon, I was shooting with a 28 millimeter 1.4, a 58 millimeter 1.4, and a 105 millimeter 1.4. But they didn't have any direct equivalents in the crop sensor field of view for those lenses. So I kind of opted to have a little bit more range. So I had the 16 millimeter 1.4 is really, really, really awesome lens on Fuji. It's pretty much my favorite lens just because of how close it focuses. But it didn't really give me all the range that I needed to. I was going from I had a 20 millimeter 1.8 as well on the wide end for Nikon. So I needed to try to bridge all that range, but I couldn't really settle on just having maybe a 24 and a 50 a 20. Sorry, I'm getting all mixed up. A 16 millimeter and a 35. I still wanted that in between range to get closer to a 28 millimeter full frame equivalent. So I opted for having more lenses. So the 16, the 23, the 35, the 56, obviously, because that's a very great portraiture lens. It's also a very great documentary lens as far as kind of taking a step back to pull those candid moments. And then I have the 90 millimeter f2 just for the sake of having reach if I need it. I actually don't pull it out that much during the wedding day, but it's basically my emergency range lens. I don't personally use zoom lenses, so that's why you don't see me having the 50 to 140 millimeter zoom lens. But yeah, it's more of at this point I was adjusting to the system and trying to figure out what lenses I could kind of part with, and I'm still between the 23 millimeter and the 35 millimeter 1.4, I still can't figure out which one I'd rather just leave at home to make it lighter. So I take all of them, and it ends up being a smidge heavier than the Nikon system that I had. But at the end of the day, the weight savings on the wedding day wasn't really a factor for me, just because I am younger, and I do have a hold-fast sling that I carry 2 bodies with, so it's not really an issue for me as far as weight. It was more about having the ergonomics and just being able to not have to switch the batteries out as fast, just because the battery life of I think 2 Fujifilm batteries is closer to one of Nikon's versus it's something that I didn't want to have to worry about. So for me, one of my biggest motivators for making this, it wasn't really a switch, it was more because I already had a pretty much full Fujifilm kit, was to condense my systems down to 1, just because I noticed that when I was out shooting every single day, documenting my family, going out for travel, I was using the Fujifilm system and getting very familiar with the controls, and just using an EVF. Really using the EVF was something that I was almost relying on.
I want to come back to the Nikon just for a moment. The D750 is known for the absolutely incredible dynamic range. I mean, there's no doubt about that. It had and still has for those who use it. I know people that use it and love it and would never part with it. You know, you'd have to pay them a lot of money to part with it, and they probably wouldn't even do it then.
Yeah.
So you're swapping to an XT3. How has the dynamic range thing really worked out for you? Because of course there's a difference.
I mean, if you ask somebody who's a true Fuji fan, that's the only camera that they love and use, they might say, oh, it's just as good as the Nikon D750, if not better. No regrets. But for me personally, I've used them out in the field on professional settings, and it definitely isn't the same. With a Nikon, you could underexpose a ISO 3200 photo and still be able to push it up a couple stops without any real noise reduction needed. You can just shoot correctly exposed at ISO 3200 on the Fuji if you're dealing with the RAWs, and you're going to have to introduce a little bit of noise reduction. It was something that I was not very familiar with my current Nikon workflow, so just being able to embrace that, I needed to add some noise reduction, I needed to adjust the sharpening, I needed to adjust the masking and all that stuff, was something that I had to get used to. But I think with the EVF, it kind of helped me to not have to rely on underexposing. With the Nikon, you're using a DSLR, which you can't really preview the exposure or have even a live histogram showing when you're shooting, especially those very fleeting moments where the lighting is all changing. But with the EVF, you can already preview that, and you can make sure your exposure is very close to accurate without even, so that you don't have to do any adjusting in post. So I think the EVF has countered the fact that the dynamic range is there, especially because of the EVF has a histogram as well as the highlight warnings. As far as my approach goes, I don't underexpose on Nikon. I would underexpose just by default, probably 1 to 1.5 stops, just because I knew it would come back.
I had the very same habit with when I was a Canon shooter, which I can't have now.
Exactly. So, but with Fuji, I'm always trying to expose very correctly, and if I'm going to underexpose on purpose, I'm always, for me personally, I only do that at the base ISO. A lot of people say that the sensor technology, you can do it at ISO 800 or something, but for me, it doesn't seem to be as clean as just doing base ISO. At base ISO, you can push back the shadows maybe 2.5 stops at most, but you're going to have to put some noise reduction. But, for the most part, a lot of my clients are consuming their photos in the digital realm. So whether it be on, a website or their Instagram or something like that. And it's only, for me, just because of the age demographic of my clients, the printing is something that I'm trying to get more people to do as far as the printing and the albums go. But for the most part, nitpicking based on, 100% zooming for a print is not as big of a concern for me than something that looks great on, Instagram or Facebook at this point. So
San Francisco is a lot sunnier than the UK. I can tell you that.
Yes.
One of the things I first noticed when using a Fujifilm camera against the Canons that I used before is the sheer difference in how details are registered on those exceptionally hot days. How are you opening up these shadows?
I actually made a video on this if people want to check it out. But the way that I maximize the dynamic range for shooting against the sunlight for the most part is, one, you got to light it properly. You have to you can't just put them in full shadow and just hope it's gonna come back up. You have to be kind of understanding what type of shot you're going to take. But if I'm going to take a shot that I'm going to rely on bringing it back in post, one thing I do is I put it in bracket mode, which is super, super nice. On the X-T3, you can bracket at 11 frames per second, and I'll bracket the shot at base ISO. And then from there, I'll kind of play with each file to see which one has the most information. And then in Lightroom, I actually use a graduated, I think it's called a graduated filter to underexpose the sky a little bit and bring back the exposure of the subject and kind of brush it out. And I kind of overview that technique in one of my YouTube videos of maximizing the dynamic range of a Fuji system.
One thing you said on your film is that you had to make a lot of changes to your photography style in order to embrace the X-T3, and I think we're establishing that as we're chatting now. So to embrace that camera as your main pro camera body now, you've had to adapt the way that you work. Now, for some people, that would be a strange way round, wouldn't it? Because changing your style for a camera, not changing a camera to suit your style.
For me, like the one thing that I think is immensely helpful is that it's going to expose my mistakes a lot. So if I make a mistake in composition with lighting or anything, the X-T3 is not going to forgive me for that. And as a wedding photographer, after being in a wedding photographer for 5 years, I felt like it's a great next step for me to up my game as far as composition and lighting go, because I cannot make mistakes with that. And I do feel that I have enough experience to kind of in the field be able to adjust and know when I'm making that mistake because of the EVF. So as far as, with depth of field, even if you have a shallow depth of field photo on a full frame, if your composition is bad, it's still going to be bad. It's just blurred out a little bit more so people can't notice it. But on the Fuji, you're going to, if you have like a distracting line right behind the couple's head or something, it's gonna be obvious. So the EVF will help you kind of see that. But at the same time, once you nail a really good framing of your subject on a crop sensor, it's going to look awesome just because everything is so sharp. Everything is going to be more focused. Those shapes that you're using to frame the subject are going to be more bold. And that's something that's really, I think for me, that I've really been happy with my photos coming out. I don't think there's a big shift in my style. I think it's just shifted in the way that I want it to evolve.
It just finally, there's one. Well, it's not just one thing. It's many things that I've noticed about your work that I like. The skin tones. You have a particularly good skin tone across all your photographs. Just take me through that process just a little bit. I know that you're going to be releasing these presets, so you can't divulge too many details, but just take me a little bit through that and how you found that change. Because I think for a lot of people, that's the hardest thing when they swap from Nikon or Canon or whatever they're swapping from.
Yeah. One thing that I've noticed that when you switch to any camera system, or for example, when you shoot with a second shooter who doesn't shoot with your camera system, that camera calibration panel, the one at the all the way bottom that no one really messes with, that really helps to kind of bridge whatever camera brand you are using to match your current style. And I do a lot of adjustment with that. They have a shadow highlight and like these saturation curves in there. It's different from the HSL. It's more just about a global color shift for that sensor. And I mess with that around quite a bit. So when I ported over my preset to Fujifilm, that was where most of the work was going into. And then as far as my skin tones go, I mean, to be honest, being a portrait and wedding photographer, that is pretty much what I'm dialing in every single time I edit a photo. If it's not a very pulled back conceptual photo, I'm always spending most of my brain power making sure that the skin tones are just right. So that comes a lot with, the white balance. And then if there's a little bit too harsh red or, some type of green hints in the skin tones, I might adjust the HSL just a little bit to kind of fix those. But it's something that, thank you for saying that, just because that makes me feel a little bit better about myself. But it's something that I pride myself in trying to make sure that when I edit, to always make sure the skin tones are looking great, just because I photograph mostly humans and people, so it's my job to make them look their best. So I want to make sure their skin doesn't look like an alien or something like that. So
well, I promise you it works really, really well. Reggie, we're going to share your links on the on not only on the FujiCast website, but of course on some of the apps that you listen to your podcast through. You'll also see these links as well. Thank you very, very much for your time. Your work is incredible. Really, really enjoyed having a chat with you. And you know, one of the wonderful things about this podcast is linking up with people all around the world, such as yourself. I know Kevin takes the rise out of me constantly for getting excited about talking to anybody from any other country.
Yeah.
But I actually think that's one of the greatest things about the community of YouTube, and your YouTube channel is growing for that reason, that you're such a an approachable person, it seems, on the screen, and long may that reign, and I'm hoping the channel just goes from strength to strength, Reggie.
Awesome, thank you so much for having me, Neil.
It goes without saying, by the way, if you do see something where you think they'd make a great guest, do tip us off, because you're just as much a part of the show as anything, and we have got some emails of late suggesting some guests, and I will be following those up, and Kev will be following those up, so thank you very, very much for those. They're really welcome. Questions then. It was your turn, wasn't it?
I think it was me, yes. So this is from Ted Patrick, and it says, you answered the question about how to handle unruly wedding guests from Helen, I think her name was. He said that. It occurred to me that unruly men are a much bigger problem for female photographers at weddings. I'd like to hear any suggestions you might have for them. Well, first of all, I think if I remember back, that wasn't a wedding actually that Helen was at. It was a music concert.
It was a gig. You're right.
And the person having a go at her was not a guest, but another photographer, or the husband, or another photographer.
Yeah, it was the wife, wasn't it, of a photographer? She said, "My husband is a photographer, and he wouldn't be doing this kind of thing." Yeah.
So it wasn't a wedding, and then I think the conversation deviated to our different things. So if I'm reading the gist of this question right, it occurred to me that unruly men are a much bigger problem for female photographers at weddings. I'd like to hear any suggestions you might have for them. That's hard, being a man.
Cattle prod, I think, is a good thing.
Yeah.
Or a taser. You can buy those in the hooky places. No, I'm joking. There's not a lot you can do, really. Sometimes walk away is the best thing.
I hate this idea that... and I'm sure it's a thing, but, I hate the thought that a female wedding photographer is targeted in any way differently to a male wedding photographer. Now, I know, and we know, of course, it's true, because we had Ralu on the show a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, we did.
And she said that when she was she had an assistant, and who was a male, but she was the primary photographer, and everybody assumed the male was the primary photographer and that she was the assistant.
Yes.
Which is a terrible thing, and that happens, and I've spoken to other female wedding photographers where that happens also. And all I can say, it's not an answer we can give really, but all I can say is, whether you're a female or a male, and if you are being abused in any way by a guest, verbally or otherwise, get yourself out of there.
Yeah.
Nobody is going to be concerned about that. Get yourself out of there. But it's never happened to me. It's never happened to you. I know you've had a couple of close calls, but
issues, yeah.
But you, by and large, weddings are happy places. Yeah. So let's hope it never happens.
Absolutely.
Look after yourselves, guys. Be careful out there.
Sam Meggs. I've got a couple of things I want to read here just into the question. Otherwise, these will never get read. Sam Meggs. So I won't get on you too much about facts and stuff about Canada you got wrong, but Toronto, by the way, is bigger than Chicago. We have lots of Toronto alone is bigger than Chicago. We have lots of great nature, but some amazing metro areas as well. I'd love to go to Canada, actually. It's a big sort of pin on a map of a place that's not been visited for me.
Yeah. See, Patrick's been to my house twice, and I've never been
to Canada. Yeah. On that note, I think this is from Samuel Meggs. Yes, on that note, I think you should do your photo meetup in Brighton, Ontario.
Oh.
Or Ontario. We can meet up and tour some of the sites, stop off for some great beer. I'll be your guide.
Did she mention the B word?
Beer?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, Samuel, it's a he, I assume, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm just going on to...
I'm putting you in the...
bookings.com right now.
Very much considered pile. Jason Angelini, just wanted to add that I'm enjoying both your photo films. Every client should have these. So thank you very much, Jason. If you don't know what Jason's talking about, that's where, in my case anyway, I chose a few years ago to use sound alongside the images in the background. I thought, well, why should this be the place only of videographers? There's no reason why a slideshow can't have the sounds of the actual event. And that doesn't have to be just weddings. I think we had Alistair in last week, and he was talking about his personal project where he's been recording people. So there's some sound to go with the actual pictures that he's recording as well. And you do your own version of photo films as well, don't you?
Yeah. But
some of them are quite stop motion-y, which I quite like.
Yeah. Interestingly, have you ever had any comeback from videographers about doing that kind of thing? Yeah. Definitely.
They don't like it at all sometimes.
No.
It's, the ones I work with regularly-ish, absolutely fine. They are great at gathering their own sound. I tend to be a bit subservient. Oh, okay, yep, no worries, sir. If it's a videographer and I can see they take sound seriously, then fine. You mic them up. Would you let me have the sound? 9 times out of 10, I've been let down by somebody recently. They say, yeah, no worries at all.
And then they change their mind after the fact?
Well, the one that let me down, actually, he was appalling at gathering sound. He had one pack that he was able to put on one speaker, and so therefore you got 2 speakers that weren't mic'd up. And he used a small Zoom H1, which are fab recorders, by the way, but they're not close enough to the talents. The person, we always call them the talent, of the person who's making the speech. Not close enough to that person for it to be good audio. I mean, there's a difference between having a microphone like this for a speech is going to be awful, isn't it? And that's what I got.
Yeah.
And if you've got a father making a really lovely, heartfelt speech, but it sounds like it's being read in a bathroom, it's just... It's not sound recording at all. So that was a letdown. My fault. Should have seen that going on and taken control of that, really. But sound is precious. And so anyway, thank you for those thoughts. The question now. Joe, thank you, Joe. Joe Abad, is it? Love the show, great insights. Amateur event photographer. I'm building a portfolio doing free events for friends and local community groups. 2 questions for you, Kev. How would you start making money from small local groups after doing several events for them? Have I completely shot myself in the foot? By working for free to start with, I guess, is the question. Number 2, at these events, I'm torn between documenting and reporting action versus artistically selecting what I'd like to present to event organisers. If I had my way, I'd selectively keep 10 to 20% of what I shoot, even if it's out of context. Where do you both draw the line when it comes to picking and choosing what needs to be photographed? So this could work for any form of photography, I guess. But let's start with number 1. How do you start asking for money after you've been doing it for free?
Well, you look at the kids, and if they're very skinny, then you've got to feed the kids. Yeah, I think, you know what, if you're setting up a business, this is very difficult to answer because not many people set up a photography business by itself. A vast majority of them have a day job and have a dream of becoming a professional photographer. They carry on doing their day job, and to get their foot in the door, they do a few free gigs, whether it's events, music, weddings, blah, blah, blah. And because they do not have the urgency and the necessity to charge, they rarely do. And then they get into the realms, the problems that Joe has here, in that he's become known as the guy that will help them out, and
Joe's a good guy, go to him, doesn't charge. He's salt of the earth, that bloke.
And even if he does start charging now, it's going to be difficult in those circumstances. However, Joe,
sorry, just before you say that, are you saying then don't ever do free work?
No, I'm not at all. But I did free weddings right at the beginning and did a couple of them. What I'm saying to people is, and I say this when I'm doing mentoring, is if you've got a day job, that's fine. That's not a problem. I hate that term, weekend warriors and everything.
Yeah.
I abhor that. But if you do have a day job, if you have another source of income, whether that's a wealthy wife, husband, mum, dad job that pays the bills, treat your photography as a separate entity. Set up a separate bank account. Have your incomes and your expenses all tied to that bank account, and use a very basic accounting system to see what's happening with it. Don't buy any new gear unless the business has enough in it. Don't invest in anything. Don't do marketing. Don't do anything without using that money from that business. If you just constantly dip into your daily salary or whatever you've got coming from your day job, I need a new camera. I need a new camera because I'm photographing that wedding next month for free. So I'm just going to buy, I won't spend much. I'm just going going to buy one of those, those cheap Fujifilm cameras. What is it? The XT30. Oh, hang on. The XT3 looks nice, but that's an extra £1,000. Ooh, oh, look at that. What's that thing? That begins with a G. GFX. What's that? GFX 50. Oh, it's only a 50. Oh, there's 100 one here. Oh, it's only £10,000.
Yeah.
It's all right though, because I'm a doctor, and so if I'm a doctor, I've got that money. I can, 10 grand's nothing really.
Yeah.
I mean, I spend that much changing the tyres on my Audi. Yeah, I'll get one of them. And that's just the end of it, isn't it? That's just not going to work. And so until you have your £10,000 in your business for your GFX, then don't do it. So that's always my kind of business advice. It's a tough nut to crack. But the fact is, if you want to start charging, you have to charge. You have to, and you have to treat it as a real business.
Yeah.
A real business.
Second part of that question was about choices, wasn't it? If I'd had my way, I'd keep 10 to 20% of what I shoot, even if it's out of context. Where do you both draw the line when it comes to picking and choosing what needs to be photographed versus what's best representative of your artistic eye and upholding your personal style? I guess, isn't this about what the client wants more than what you want yourself? Or
yeah, I couldn't quite figure out whether this is about doing selections or not. Whether what do you give in terms of how many you take compared to how many the client get percentage-wise? Approximately.
I never actually. I mean, I know that I present somewhere for a wedding event. For me, it's between 400 and 600, which is a
same for me.
Huge number. I know difference, but for between 400 and 600 is fine. And the bizarre thing is, it doesn't matter whether it's a 6-hour wedding or a 16-hour wedding. It always seems to be the same number.
Yeah, it's similar to me.
I don't know why that is. If it's a portrait shoot, then certainly less than 100.
Yeah.
If we're walking around a lake, there's going to be about 40, 45 of my favourite images.
But going back to Joe's question, I would.
Was that what you meant? I think so.
Yeah. I wouldn't be holding back images just to make a number up.
No.
So if I'm a 400. Deliver a 400 image photographer, I'm not going to be removing images just to get them down to 400. That doesn't make sense to me if they're strong images. Likewise, I'm not going to include the images that I don't think are good enough to make that 400. So yeah, ultimately it's down to what the client wants. And in terms of percentages, he mentioned 10, 20% or whatever. I don't know whether that's, I would only give them 20% of what I shot on the day. So let's just say he's taken 2,000 pictures, and reading between the lines, and Joe, let us know if this is wrong. I'm thinking you're giving them every picture you take, whereas you are only happy with 10 or 20 of them. So your responsibility as the photographer is not only just to press the button and take the pictures, but you are also the curator of those pictures. So your responsibility is to go home, go back to your studio or whatever, and edit those down. Be a strong editor, edit down to the 10-20% that you're happy with, and give those to the client. If you just give them every picture you take, and then that's not going to work, is it?
David Yarrow recently, have you seen David Yarrow's work? Does this immensely amazing wildlife work, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
He said something very interesting about the how much you shoot. Plurality is the bane of many photographers. Says Yarrow said he'd had something like 6 good pictures in 12 months. Now I know it's a different kind of photography altogether. I think sometimes this we're getting onto the numbers thing here. The amount you present is just not important, is it? It's got to be a quality over quantity thing. And I always remember Jeff Askoff, the former Canon wedding ambassador in the UK anyway, saying that he'd had a client that had questioned the amount of photographs being given on one occasion. I think Jeff used to, this could be going back to film days, actually, so slightly different playing field here. But I think Jeff came into the room and poured 125 pictures over a coffee table or something. Yeah. And said, do you think that's enough? And anybody facing 125 prints over a table would say, yes, that's more than enough. Yeah. It doesn't need to be 5, 6, 7, 8, 900, 1,000, 2,000 pictures.
No. But the problem is these days people...
Expectations.
It's expectations set by other photographers. That's the problem.
Yes,
so people are using it as marketing collateral. Yeah. You will get 1,000 pictures. I will give you every picture I take on the day. Yeah. And that's just ludicrous, frankly.
Daft. Right, yours.
Okay, hi Kevin and Neil. I'd pay for this podcast. Thanks. Oh, that's very kind, isn't it? Where should we send...
well, funnily enough, I saw the other day The platform that we're on, this makes no difference for you if you're a listener, because the platform that it's on is the platform that it's on. You wouldn't know.
This is the one I can never pronounce.
It's called Libsyn. Okay, it's
say it again.
Libsyn, Libsyn, Libsyn. It's a very, very good podcast hosting service. Do have an opportunity to have a bonus material thing. So I did start thinking of bonus material. Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway,
can you hear those cogs turning?
We don't need it now, because Patrick Betcher is going to send us all his money, and he's going to send it all the way from Milwaukee.
Fabulous.
Milwaukee, isn't that where the Fonz was from? Milwaukee.
Was Milwaukee the Fonz?
I think it was. Come on, Alan, let us know. Anyway, so hi Kevin and Neil, blah, blah, blah. I pay for this podcast, so very nice. As someone attempting a career change into photography, I am trying to find the balance between two things: breaking into the industry by taking on available jobs, and defining and advertising the specific type of work I'd like to do in order to create my own enjoyable and sustainable career. Sustainable, even. I've heard you both talk about advertising only what you'd like to shoot and being prepared to turn down the rest. I would love that freedom, of course, but imagine that process takes some finesse and at times sacrifice. I guess my question is this: could you both talk a little bit about your successes and struggles as you created your business identity in those early days in order to create the freedom you enjoy today? Cheers from a guy in Milwaukee, USA, who prefers to shoot weddings in a documentary style.
Yes.
Thank you, Patrick.
Good for you.
Send us all your money.
Go on then.
Well, I think the critical thing is that show what you want to shoot. Which is easier said than done. I absolutely understand that. And I also, I must admit, I feel a little bit sorry for our friends in America who desperately want to shoot this documentary style as we try and do, because it's just not done. It's not the thing in many parts of the world, in fact, and I feel the USA is one of those places. Not that it's not done by photographers, and there's some amazing ones out there. I mean, Tyler Workin, for example, I love his stuff now.
You're a big fan of his, aren't you?
Yeah, I love Tyler. And I just think that the clients or the potential weddings out there are very formulaic, follow a particular format. That whole kind of first look in the morning, and the dinner the evening before, all of that kind of stuff. And I just think it's different. The expectations are very different. But that said, if you are shooting in a minority style, that means your target audience is smaller, but you've got a much greater chance of hooking those fish because there's less of you as the photographer to look for.
So it's an advantage.
I think it's an advantage. Yeah, absolutely.
Before every other so-and-so starts doing it.
But you do need to have the bottle to do it. Simple as that. And you can't...
But you don't know until you start. You could set up a sub-business. You could set up something on the side that's very, very clearly focused for one thing only. So when people go to that website, they think, I identify with that, I know what that's about, I know what I'm in for.
Yeah, or you could simply do something like, let's just say, there is nothing wrong with doing portraits, and documentary photography can, of course, include all of that stuff. But let's just say that's the element that you want to shoot less of. Just put less emphasis on those on the website. If it's the blog post that you're writing and you've done your portraits and you've done your group shots and all that kind of stuff, but you don't want to emphasize it, don't feel that you have to put those at the top of the blog post. Don't even feel like you need to put them in order. You can have a separate section of your blog post right at the very bottom that just says, simply headed, portraits, whatever, and just so that just pushes the images down the bottom. So you're still showing them if you're concerned about not getting bookings because of that, but you're not giving them so much emphasis, and certainly don't have them on the homepage and all of that kind of stuff. Ultimately, it really is about having the balls to do it, and you've got two choices. You either do it the way you enjoy it, as you mentioned, Patrick, or you do it in a way you don't enjoy it, in which case you'll stop doing it pretty soon.
Yeah, or you just carry on doing it and get very bitter, which is a great shame.
Yeah, and which means you'll stop.
I actually have got a few portraits in my gallery. Not many at all, but just enough to divert that question if it should arise. But fortunately these days, the last couple of weeks in particular have proved that people, they go straight past those portraits. They're not interested in them, and they're hiring me for the right reasons. Jezza B, thank you very much for this question. Hi Neil, Kevin, really enjoying listening to the podcast. Highlight for me was a couple of weeks ago. That will be episode 9 when you interviewed Sean Tucker, the YouTuber. What an amazing photographer he is. Thank you for the introduction. My question's about second shooters. To give you some context, I'm a Brit, Canberra-based, moved here 3 years ago. I was a wedding shooter in Brighton. My business is starting to now build here. I remember this being a question I got asked in the UK, but here in Canberra, all the wedding shooters seem to be husband and wife teams. I like to work alone, but it's losing me business. Any thoughts as to what I can say in favour of being a solo shooter when I talk to prospective clients? Now, I can give you something I say. I've talked about Giles before, Giles Penfound, very dear friend of mine who is still a photographer, but he's not working in conflict photography anymore. He was a conflict photographer, worked for the British Army for many, many years. And I remember us having one of our we've had these as well, Kev. In fact, we're well due. I've kept this. Okay, this here. Look at this. This got Taylor's very old single harvest port from This is 1964. Look at that bottle.
Wow.
I've kept that purposefully. I've not drunk. I've kept that for you and I to have. It's been 2 years since we last got.
What's the word?
Yeah. We had one of our port finishes to... look, I've still got that. It's there. It's got your...
It's got my name on it there.
Your name on it.
Yeah.
But I was having a port-fueled after dinner discussion with Giles, and he said to me, he leant across the table, said, you wedding photographers are a funny breed. And I bet
there was another word that began with F before then.
Yeah, and I said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, it seems to me like you hunt in packs. And what he meant by that was that there's always 2 or 3 of you. Why do you need that many people to tell a story? Honestly, he said, in fact, I keep... See that picture of there's a Challenger tank up there? Mm-hmm. That's a picture Giles took in one of the Iraq conflicts. And I think it's one of the first he took when he stepped off a Chinook helicopter. And somebody put a camera in his hand and said, go make some pictures. And I keep it there to tell exactly the story to all the clients who ever come here and talk to me and might ask that question. Or actually, I normally present this as a question from me, so we can get rid of this, so that if it becomes an issue later on where they're seeing another photographer, that they'll refer back to my picture or the picture on my wall from Giles, and I'll tell them this story about the fact that he covered Iraq, Serbia, Bosnia, Northern Ireland. In fact, the list just goes on and on and on. And pretty much all of the time, there would have been other photographers there, but when he was working, he worked alone. And there was a very simple reason. Less photographers, less noise, less of a target. And he found as a storyteller that he didn't need other people around him. It just cramped his style, and sooner or later people will be looking over their shoulder wondering where the other one was, where the other photographer is, where's the other one? And he found that he could be far more engaging, because he's never afraid to engage with people when he's making pictures, even documentary style. And for him it worked, and I use that as an example.
It's definitely a thing over here as well. I think he said that he was in Australia, but it's here. One of the things that annoys me is when you see on websites 2 photographers. Yeah,
like it's the reason to purchase.
Yeah, or
I'm being cautious here because we both work as solo shooters mainly.
Yes,
and this is not to to undermine the reasons why people do like working with another person, because it can be many and varied.
No, absolutely. And as long as both of those people are good photographers, then great. That should be a...
So as long as... Have you just broken that?
Something else I've just broken. I don't even know what it is. So as long as they're both photographers, right, and good photographers, and that's fine. But it's when it's people advertise themselves as wedding photographers, and then they think, oh, hang on, we need to. Everybody else is doing a second one. My boyfriend, he can. Give him a camera, or my girlfriend give her a camera, and then just because it's a second person, it doesn't mean they're a second photographer, and it certainly doesn't mean they're good. And not that I'm saying that you or I are particularly good at whatever, but I'm just saying that you cannot commoditize an art form You just can't. And so by just saying there's two of us doesn't mean it's going to be good. And in often cases, it may be negative. Yeah. So what I say to clients when they talk about that is I say that, you know, it's similar kind of analogy, but not kind of military one. Is I just say that the more of me there are, the more your guests will be aware, and they will end up feeling like they've been paparazzi'd rather than feeling like they've been to a wedding. And that normally that kind of sinks in, and they think about that a little bit. But don't get me wrong. I mean, we know Rob and Sarah Gillespie. They work together as a husband-wife team, and they work very well together because A, they're both very good photographers, and B, they're married and they work as a team, and it all works well. Rob isn't just Sarah's extra hand on the day, and Sarah's not just Rob's extra hand on the day, and it shouldn't be a marketing. It just shouldn't be a marketing thing. I don't think like having two photographers is just like saying I've got 4 cameras. I've got 2 cameras. I got better shoes. I've got the shirt I'm wearing is better than the other bloke. It's not. That doesn't make the pictures any better. It doesn't make the style any better. It doesn't. It means nothing. It just means you're going to get more pictures, and they're not necessarily going to be good pictures. It might interfere with the day. When
you look at a magazine at the weekend or whatever, and you're looking at a photo story or something, is that photo story that you're engaged in any less engaging because there was only one person there? Of course it's not.
And I mean, of course I get it when people want coverage of bridal prep and groom prep, and
that's a logistics thing.
That's a logistics thing, absolutely. And so that's where it does play into it. But how many times have you done groom prep in the last 3 years?
Well, when the groom's been in the same building and I've darted backwards and forwards between the rooms, I really don't gather that much from the blokes.
I never do it. I just don't. I never do it.
It's almost like, what are you doing here? Really? No. Do we need you?
Exactly.
We'll see you at the church, mate.
Yeah. We're gonna have a pint. Yeah. And that's normally, if I'm doing any groom stuff, that's where I'll catch them having a pint downstairs or whatever. So yeah, I mean, it's the same here as it is in Australia, clearly. Yeah, but it's
same questions.
Yeah.
Have we got time for one more question?
I do have one.
Go on then. You do the last one of the week.
I'm not sure I can answer it though. Dennis Mook.
It could be an open question. Yeah. Left unanswered.
Left the show. I love the show and love your personalities. Nice. Photographing weddings, as well as other types of events, can require you to be continuously on your feet for many hours. The comfort of your feet can be the difference between being grumpy while enduring sheer agony or not being a distraction.
This is a good question.
To your concentration. Yeah. Weddings and other events require a dress code of a sort, and one can't wear just any type of comfortable shoes. What kind of shoes do you recommend?
I love that.
That are comfortable and not causing pain. What shoes do you wear, Neil?
Well, I try to leave my high heels behind. I don't know. I got a really nice pair of. I don't want them to look too. What's the word? I mean, I don't want them to be too formal because otherwise I end up with real foot ache. And he's right. You're on your pegs for forever, it seems sometimes. So I got a really nice pair of DM shoes recently. They're not the big sort of sticky outy wedgy ones, the wedge that goes all the way down.
Yeah.
They look quite good. They polish up nicely and feel comfortable.
They will last as well. About DMs.
As my mum used to say, buy shoes that last, son.
Absolutely. Yeah, quite right. Yeah, I've got a pair of I don't know what they're called. Charles something or other made them.
Charles Twit. Is that the Twit ones? Twit?
No.
Charles? No.
Don't think so. Right. Maybe. Anyway, they're suede and they're really comfortable, really light.
Oh, you love your suede shoes.
Yeah, they're brown. So, yeah, I've had them for years. I think I've probably shot weddings in them for the last 5 years.
Do you ever wear your green DMs?
No, I love my green DMs.
People love your green DMs.
Do you ever, we found them the other day. We were tidying up the kids' room and we came across a box of my shoes and my green DMs was at the bottom. And I was like, I wondered where they'd gone. And Jen was like, yeah, there's a reason I put them there.
She doesn't like them?
She doesn't like my green DMs, no.
Oh, your green DMs go... Do you remember when you went to... was it Tokyo and everybody loved your green DMs?
Yeah. They loved it, yeah.
The talk of the town.
Yeah. Kevin and his green DMs.
So, you could start wearing those to the weddings maybe, could you?
Yeah, they do look like Wellington boots, though.
Do they? Yeah. I think they look quite cool.
Yeah, anyway, cool. I'm cool.
Thank you for your questions. As always, that's the end of another week. Thank you for your questions. Lifeblood of the show. We can't make this engine...
Black ice, it's an absolute death trap.
We can't make this engine run without your thoughts and questions. Send them in via the website address. Click at fujicast.co.uk. Thank you to our guest this week, Reggie Ballesteros. By the way, all the links to the show will be on the website as well. Big love to our friends at Simpler Straps for letting us give away a camera strap each to our favourite email question of the week. And if you'd like to see their amazing straps, then go to simpler.us. Right, payoffs. We're going to have to think of a new way of doing this. Guess who it is? Well, in fact, I'm going to go first this time. It's going to be our young lad Thomas.
My dad's Instagram is Neil James. See his films on YouTube at Neil James Photo. His website is neiljames.com for pictures and one-to-one mentoring. And you can hear his other photography podcast, which is called Breathe Pictures, wherever you get your podcasts. Oh, and don't forget his name is spelled Neale.
And on behalf of Kev, it's Rosa.
My dad's Instagram is Kevin Mullins Photography. See his films on YouTube at Documentary Eye. His website is kevinmullinsphotography.co.uk. Or for street workshops, training and everything Fujifilm, go to f16.click.
Do you know, I keep meaning to say this, but Rosa's got that really cool sort of airy kind of sound of voice for... She could be a voiceover artist.
Oh, she wants to be an actress. That's her ambition.
Yeah. Say that to Rosa.
Yeah, or actor. I don't think you're allowed to say actor.
It's actor now, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you in advance for the love you spread in the Apple Podcast reviews. We're trying to mention each and every one in the Self-Indulgent Minute, and we will see you next week. Goodbye.
Goodbye.